welcome to another edition of On the Town. I'm your host, Ed Edelson. On the Town is a series of interviews with leaders who have helped to make Southbury a great place to live, raise a family, own a business, and retire. Today our guest is Kevin Bennett, a native Southburyan and co-founder of the architectural firm Bennett Sullivan. As I think you will find out, most of what we think of as the look of Southbury is the work of this architectural firm and its visionary leaders, Kevin Bennett and Hugh Sullivan. I hope to have Hugh on a show at some future point so he can share his insights. In addition to his professional work, Kevin has been a volunteer in the town on many committees, including chairing the exciting festivities of the town's 200th anniversary. And I'll put a picture of this up so you can see the size of the committee that worked back in 1987,
Not quite that old.
right, to celebrate the town's history. So Kevin, welcome to On the Town, and thank you for being here this morning. Before we begin our talk about your contributions to the town's built environment, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about growing up in Southbury and your earliest recollections about the establishment of Heritage Village in the late 1960s when you were still a young teenager.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you for asking me to be on your show. My earliest recollections in Southbury were of the building of Heritage Village, and we were young boys at the time. You know, we would ride our bicycles around Heritage Village during the construction. When I was born in this town, it sounds kind of strange to say, but you know, there were more cows than people. We had a lot of dairy farms. There were about 4,000 people lived in Southbury at the time. Everyone knew each other. Everywhere you went, they knew who you were, they knew what you were up to, and that was sometimes good and sometimes bad. But we were a real community at that time, and you know, I remember early times of you know, like with town meetings and all, and you know, the arguments that would go on, and you know, afterwards they would go out for a drink at the Southbury Inn afterwards, or the Three Gables or Kelly's Oak Tree Inn. But these guys all worked things out, and things weren't as political as they are today. But they worked for the betterment of the town, and they worked for the common good. So.
No, I think we can say, you know, Heritage Village now is a very distinctive part of Southbury. Do you think people realized how big and influential it would be in terms of the future of Southbury?
I don't believe that they realized how much it would be an integral part of Southbury. I do remember in the early days it was kind of a us and them sort of mentality. But as people started to come in and serve on committees and got to know the members of the community and worked with and kind of grew together, they formed relationships. They brought expertise. You know, you had well-to-do people came from New York City. They were, you know, titans of industry. They were lawyers, they were doctors, they were professional people. Right. You got all kinds of good insight as to what would happen in a community in the future.
Right. But you know, I have this image of you driving around or riding around on your bicycle. I had similar situations in Long Island when there was a lot of housing growth around my area, and how much fun that was to see the construction going on. But that was pretty new, I think, in the sense of Southbury was a pretty stable place, let's say, before Heritage Village. There wasn't that much building going on. No. There weren't that many, let's say, tradespeople. No. Because my impression was you saw lots of people coming into work all of a sudden.
Yes, and I remember when we were very young, we would sell, you know, Kool-Aid or lemonade on the corner of Poverty Road and Main Street in the afternoon when all the workers let out, in the summer when it was hot. But we were very young at that time. And, you know, I would go around with Randy Wheeler, whose father had an excavation company, and my father had an excavation company, and we would ride around the entire village just watching what went on. Right. But it was a large growth. We didn't have that much in Southbury at the time. I mean, you know, those three restaurant bars that I talked about. We had the Southbury Food Center was out front with Stone's Hardware. You had the Southbury Lumberyard. You didn't really have a whole lot. You had the pharmacy out front of where the liquor store is today. And
well, I think it would be good to clarify the 3 restaurants you mentioned, because none of them exist today. So
No.
maybe just say a word or two about, again, their names and where they were. So
well, it was the Southbury Inn is located where I actually purchased it and built the 316 Main Street South, where the new local gourmet and hometown pizza are located.
Okay.
We have the Fred Astaire and the Jack Cesaro's dentist
Dentistry.
office. We have the 88 Main Street South, which was the old Three Gables restaurant.
okay,
And then we have Kelly's Oak Tree Inn, which is basically in the same state that
Right.
it was when I was a kid, only a little bit older.
right. Well, so we had a lot of variety of restaurants even back then. So that's the good news there. So you grew up here, you were educated here, and from there, where did you go to college?
Well, I grew up through the school system in Southbury. It was Southbury High School at the time, which is where the Rochambeau Middle School is now. And we were located in there with the high school as well as the kindergarten. So when I went to kindergarten, I was in the high school. So it was pretty interesting when you
Okay.
left to take your little red wagon up to get the milk at the kitchen and bring it back to the classroom when you were only,
Right.
3 feet tall and everybody, you were looking at kneecaps.
Right.
And then I went there again for high school and went to Kent State University in Ohio. My partner Hugh had already gone there. We were both products of Dale Drzwicki's mechanical drawing class. And
This is at the high school area?
at the high school.
Okay.
And he was very progressive with his ideas, and he allowed us to do architectural drawings, and we got credit for mechanical drafting
Okay.
because there was no architectural program then. But probably close to a dozen students from Southbury have gone to Kent State University. So we had a connection there, and Hugh was out there and brought me out and showed me the school and introduced me to the dean, and I was able to get in. And then 5 or 6, 7 years later, I was working in Southbury and Hugh was working in Boston for Moshe Safdie Associates, and I had been working in New Haven for Herb Newman Associates, and we got together one evening and he asked about coming on as a forming a partnership, and I said okay, and that was 1983, and we're still together.
Okay. I'm sorry to backtrack a little bit, but talking about growing up here, because we mentioned this before we went on, when Heritage Village was being built, people may not remember that it was all farm. So
Yes.
it wasn't that you had to cut down a lot of trees to do this.
Right.
Basically, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the trees we see were deliberately planted as part of the landscaping.
Correct.
Because it was fields that they were working in.
Yeah,
So-
they had most of the town was devoid of trees. When I was young, you could walk from our home on Main Street down to Consolidated School, which is now Gainfield, and you could basically walk straight out and walk right straight through what is all woods today.
Yeah.
I do remember my Aunt Maud, and she was probably in her 90s, and she was looking around and she said, "Where did all these trees come from?" Because when she was a little girl
Yeah.
going to the Bullet Hill School,
Yeah.
there were no trees. Everything was fields.
Right. Well, things keep changing.
They do, and keep growing.
They do, and it's something we have to work with and not try to stop all the time. Well, so the firm gets started. You and Hugh agree that you're going to go into business together, and that's 1983. 83.
I was working on and just completed the Pomperog Office Park Building Number 1, and that was actually in a field where I grew up across the street and would spend all my days in the barn. It was a dairy farm, and we had our horses there. But it was in the back section of that 8-acre parcel, which is now a 3-building complex. But that's where we opened our first office.
Now, an office building, a good-sized office building in and of itself, my sense is that was sort of like the first built office building. People had offices, but they were really taking over older buildings and,
Correct.
redoing them or repurposing them.
Correct.
But this was sort of the first idea of, or the first one of a office building per se.
This was the first commercial office building only. It was 21,000 square feet, and it was actually very popular with the medical community. A lot of the doctors were in, as you say, small homes and different offices that were not very modern. And this had an elevator, it had handicap accessibility, which was very new at the time.
Right.
We can kind of take it for granted today, but the 5x7 bathroom that we had to build in those days we think is huge. Today they're 7x7,
Okay.
and putting grab bars in was a modern amenity.
Right.
But it's come a long way.
And that office park building, once it was built, filled up pretty quickly?
Filled up very quickly.
The demand was there.
Correct.
Okay. And I'm sensing when you say doctors, a lot of that, again, was driven by Heritage Village, that all of a sudden you had, as you know, double the population within a matter of years after it being built, and
Correct.
bringing in a demographic that really did need a lot more medical care.
Yes. And it was it raised the average age of Southbury, but it also brought people that were used to having more modernized medical facilities. I grew up where Leo's is located now. We were in the home next to it, which was the bunkhouse for the Hickocks, and Leo's was actually where gentleman Dr. Benton, who was basically, I think at that time in Southbury, was the only doctor. And he would see you in his home.
Mm-hmm.
So, if something happened, you could go right to his house and you could care for him. Later, he had an office down by where Subway is today.
Okay.
So, it was a small community, and we didn't have the medical care that we started to get once Heritage Village did come.
So that's your first project, one office park building. Eventually it became 3.
Correct.
And I'm not sure if you remember the dates on those. They come pretty rapidly after?
They were 1983 was our first building 1, and then 1985 we did building 3, because the Newtown Savings Bank was located in front of the lumberyard at that time, which was the little green building where the pharmacy is today, in front of Chatfield's. And they wanted a location, so we built on that curb section with a drive-through in building number 3, and we built that one second. Okay. And they moved in, and that building filled up, and then we did building number 2 in 1987. Okay. So 83, 85, and 87.
All right, and going on from there, many more projects. Bennett Square is sort of one of the next ones to basically build those buildings?
No, my father started Bennett Square in 1973, and I actually worked on that when I was still in high school.
Okay.
And then we built the back building first, and then started to make our way around. And then we acquired in 1993 the building where Leo's is. That was built in the mid to late 80s, 86, okay. 87. And it was a house that was renovated. They kept the front portion and added on in the back. And that actually went into foreclosure in 1991, 92. And we purchased that building from the Resolution Trust Fund, which was basically cleaning up
savings and loans.
Savings and loans.
Yeah, that
and
debacle.
The CBT Bank, Connecticut Bank and Trust, was a tenant in the back of the building, and they actually never opened. They had all the furniture, all the banking equipment. There was ashtrays on the desks, chairs. nameplates with no names, and we purchased a building with all that stuff in place.
They just never
Never opened.
Wow.
They failed,
Right.
and they held the mortgage on the building, and that was part of the previous owner's financial issues.
Now, again, we're going to talk about some more of the projects that you've had the opportunity to work on and contribute. But some people would say there's sort of a Southbury look that is associated with Bennett Sullivan.
Yeah.
Do you remember you and Hugh talking about that per se, to say, you know, here's a look we want, or it just sort of evolved over time? And how intentional was it? How much of it? Sometimes I have an image of you and Hugh arguing it out of, you know, what should these things look like? But I don't know if that's true. That's just in my mind.
We weren't that sophisticated.
Okay.
We weren't looking that far forward. We were two young men that were starting an office, and work would come in and we would work on it, and we had a collaborative, and designs would start to go, and as we got larger and more people, you know, Hugh would be in charge of some projects, I would be in charge of some projects, but the office was an open office. We didn't have closed offices with a door. We were part of an open community, so everyone works together. Everyone sees everything that goes on in the offices. This was the days when you had, you know, the drawings on the tables, and today it's all on computer. But no, Hugh and I, you know, talk regularly, and when discuss things, he asks questions of me that, you know, some of my, you know, talents are a little stronger. I ask questions of him. There's projects that he likes to work on. There's projects that I like to work on.
Okay.
So it's a collaborative.
All right. Well, let's go back to some of the early projects, and because I think controversy has been sort of a part of many of the projects as you propose them. One that you know, again, so many of these I feel like they've been there forever, but they haven't been. The Southbury Travel Center,
Yes.
by Exit 14. Talk a little bit about the, you know, the impetus to do that, why that was seen as necessary in its time, and what people were concerned about, to some degree.
Right. Well, that was in 1985. It was a concept of a travel center. That nucleus came out of the bus system that came through. It was Bonanza Bus at the time, and they took and wanted to have somewhere for the buses to go, because they used to stop on Main Street.
Right.
And they stopped in front of what was the Rexall drugstore at the time, and there's the commuter parking lot in front of the Pomperog Office Park was just a dirt parking lot, and it was just like from a movie. That the bus would come in, the air brakes would go off, a cloud of dust would come up, and you know, some nice lady would get off the bus, you know, in the dust, and it was like the Midwest. But today, you know, we had the travel center down there where you could come and sit and wait. You have a restaurant, which in those days was Thatcher's. We did that building, and you know, Chuck got the whole thing done, and you know, word got.
Being
He was the owner of the building at that time, and he had it all ready, and word got out that he was going to open for a soft opening. Well, the entire town of Southbury showed up. It was an absolute fiasco. The kitchen help didn't know where anything was. They hadn't even done a dry run yet. You know, the bartenders didn't know where the bottles were. The place was packed. Everyone showed up, and it was a great night. As confusing and crazy as it was, everyone had a wonderful time, and everyone understood. It was, he didn't even know he was opening until probably that morning. So.
And it, just to be clear, that's where Maggie McFly's is now.
Maggie McFly's is there today.
Okay, because it's really three parts. There's the service station, the restaurant, Maggie McFly's now, and then where where Dunkin' Donuts is, and where the bus now still comes.
Yeah, and they lost it for a while, and we were able to bring it back.
So if we move, maybe moving up Main Street. Now, a lot of people know this site, which is now the Southbury Green. I think, still shows Staples, so that's come and gone.
Yeah.
When is that project? And a lot of people know it's in an area that was referred to as the Pumpkin Patch.
Correct.
but I think you remember it a little differently.
I remember it as the Brindley family owned it, and it was a cornfield, and they had their cow barn out front, and Alan's father actually ran the bus service, so they parked the school buses there.
Okay.
And later, after the corn wasn't there anymore, the Vazauskas brothers would plant pumpkins there, and people would come and buy pumpkins in the season. And then it got to a point where they didn't plant them anymore. They just brought them in and spread them around the field, and kids would come and get their pumpkins. So.
Okay. And the actual the development of the shopping area.
Correct.
Do you remember the year on that or the time frame?
That was 1986. I'm sorry, 96, 97. It was Robert Elder out of Cambridge, and he was a developer who had some very first-class projects, and we were very fortunate to get them because there were the Arredondo brothers that owned it prior to that, and they were going to put up a preformed concrete building with images of pumpkins on it. It looked almost like an industrial warehouse.
Okay.
And the commission didn't go for that idea. So when we worked on it after Bob Elder had purchased the property, we designed something of a shopping center that was very nice. And it was only because of Bob's understanding of architecture. We were the only non-nationally known architectural firm that Bob had ever worked with at the time.
Okay.
He hired big names, and he felt very strongly about the brick going around the whole building because we explained to him the view from I-84, the roofs and the enclosure of the mechanicals.
Right.
And these became norms for Southbury.
Right. No, I think to me, we'll see it in others, but I think the roof line, very distinctive, and it adds to some degree cost compared to that warehouse look.
Correct.
But I think it's been to the benefit of the community in terms of when people drive up Main Street.
Well, I think that's what it was. The quality of the architecture and the fact that the property line was so far off of Main Street, there was a large area that we worked with the town to create the Southbury Green, which the town never had a center. Right. And I remember my grandfather saying that from when I was a young boy, that we need to be more like New Haven and have a town green. And Hugh worked very hard to design that. He worked on the streetscape committee for years and still does. He was instrumental in creating that ribbon of sidewalk that everybody thought would go nowhere.
Nobody would ever use it.
There were little pieces of it.
Right.
When we did the Pomperog Office Park in 85, we did a flat section along Main Street for a future sidewalk. And people thought, what would you ever use that for?
Right.
And when the pieces started to come together, people started to understand it. And I recall in front of Bennett Square, Carol Herskowitz at the time had asked me if I could put that section in. And I had to wait for my dad to go to Florida so I could do the work out there because he didn't think that it was all that necessary.
Carol being the first selectman at
Carol
that time.
Herskowitz was the first selectman. But my dad, sitting on the porch, started to notice people using the sidewalk a lot. And it got to a point where it's a daily event. People use it day and night.
Yep, definitely true. And you get a lot of compliments. Another distinctive building, and maybe you can remind us of the date. I believe this is the Southbury Medical Building.
No.
I'm sorry, this is the Hearth.
This is the Hearth.
And again, the roof line is very distinctive in the panel, or the trim work, if you will.
That was done in the late 90s. It was 120 bed assisted living. And at that time, there were like 4 assisted livings planned for Southbury because a study came out that we required 150 beds of assisted living.
Okay.
And there were 3 or 4 groups that wanted to put them in. We happened to be the first ones to submit, and they actually put a moratorium on the assisted livings after they approved this project because they were afraid of having too many. And it was actually a very good decision, because this one actually took longer to occupy than they thought it would, and I don't think a second one would have done that well at the time.
Right. Well, overcapacity can be a problem.
Yes.
And then you end up with everybody going bankrupt and
And not
nobody
a
being
good-
served.
Right.
Now, the other area you've been, Bennett Sullivan has made some very distinctive improvements or contributions is in the religious area.
Correct.
This is Sacred Heart, which is, well, I guess I'm not sure. Was there an initial building and then you worked on the expansion, or from?
There was the original building is the center. That was the sanctuary originally, and that was a wood with formed laminated beams.
Okay.
It's the center portion, and in this area here, that was the main building. This was an addition by King and Tuthill, I believe, and then we did the additions towards 172 and Main Street, and that was in I think the early 2000s.
Okay, a very prominent building is obviously when you get off at exit 14. It's
Yes.
for many people the first thing they'll see about Southbury.
And Southbury is very good at the gateways, you know, seeing what those first impressions of getting off. At exit 15, you know, the town did all the landscaping in the state right-of-way so that it wasn't just a paved island and asphalt from side to side.
Right. And then on the other side of town, I believe this is the Jewish campus.
Yeah,
B'nai
B'nai Israel.
and the Jewish Federation. And this is, not again, but this was a field, and it was a new build from the
ground
design
up. Yeah.
And well, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of the look and feel you were trying to get there.
This was a project that we worked on with a colleague of ours from Tel Aviv, Uri Sharet, and Herbert Newman Associates out of New Haven. It was a collaborative. We designed this building with them. We did the working drawings, we got it approved, and we coordinated the construction. And the building was designed to look like a farmhouse or a barn. The white barn silo that you can see on here, the shape of a barn. It has a unique floor plan because of the wetlands in the front and the wetlands in the back.
Okay.
We actually had to weave it around through the center.
Well, again, people see it as both distinctive, but fits into the landscape. So it's another, my obviously view, contribution to the town.
If I could on that as
Sure.
well, Ed, there, if you see in the photograph, there's a cow pasture in the front.
Right.
And in the beginning, they were going to take the cows out of the property. Bill McAllister, who has the house next door, used that whole field for his cows. And I had talked to the committee for the synagogue and asked them if it would be possible to leave the cows there, and they didn't really want them there. But I let them know that this was a wetted meadow, and you couldn't go in there to maintain it unless you were agricultural, because it was a wetlands.
Right.
And by keeping the cows there, it kept all the foliage from overgrowing, which
Right.
would have been basically a wetlands with trees
Right.
growing up in front of the building.
Right, would have hidden them from the street, which
Right.
for any activity, I was going to say commercial activity, but even for religious activity,
Right.
you want to be visible from the street or people aren't going to find you. Let's just see, we got two more here we just wanted to show, and this is the Southbury Medical Building.
Yes.
Again, and that's expanding as we speak.
Correct.
Because of demand for more medical space.
Yeah.
But always kind of keeping that roof line in mind and the look and feel of it.
Now, at the time, this was actually a residential zone, and we were able to expand the commercial zone up to Old Waterbury Road, and it was done as a planned development district, a PDD, and that allowed us to do the office building, but we did it in a colonial vernacular that made a transition between the commercial Southbury Plaza and the historic Goldsmith building, which is on the other side of Old Waterbury Road. And I think that it made a nice transition
Right.
between the two.
And just to add to, and that starts the historic district of Main Street.
White Oak District starts on the other side of Old Waterbury Road and goes up to the Woodbury line.
No, I think that whole idea of a transition really helps, and that's such a distinctive part of Southbury, that Main Street historic district, or White Oak, as you say. And then I think we already talked about this one on Main Street. This is it 316 is the number?
No, this is actually the Reservoir Office Park located at exit 16.
Yes, yes.
That was a parcel that we purchased that was going to be the site for the high school. The
Really?
town was going to purchase it, and Dr. Suma owned the property. And the sale didn't go through. They actually bought the piece where the Pomperaug High School is located now. This stayed on the market for a long time, and it was zoned for manufacturing and industrial. And we were able to get a zone change for it to be professional office, as well as the zone went all the way up to within 100 feet of Reservoir Road.
Okay.
And we were able to move that zone line to 300 feet back, which developed 4 residential houses, which were the buffer between the commercial professional office building and the residential.
Okay.
So we didn't want to build the office park right up to the road and have residential on the other side. So we were able to get 4 building lots on Reservoir Road, which was the buffer for the housing, and the people appreciated the fact that we weren't coming right up to their front door.
And I think you have another park plan, but kind of looking for the economy to rebound a little bit.
There are 2 additional lots,
Oh, 2, okay.
which each have about 2 20,000 square foot buildings on them. That was stalled with the intersection. We were sent back to the State Traffic Commission at the time,
Right.
and they were requesting us to do a large renovation of the intersection, and the project couldn't financially support it. So the town was going to do some work on Old Waterbury Road, but the state has finally finished that work, and I think they're just about done now. They rebuilt from Middlebury to Oxford and up Old Waterbury Road.
No, it seems to flow a lot better.
Yeah.
Just that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the newest project that a lot of people have seen come in the last couple of years has been the cinema.
Yes.
Quite a lot, and it's more than the cinema, we should point out. I mean,
Correct.
we've got, again, medical offices there, a restaurant in the making, and I think there's one other thing I'm forgetting, but clearly the cinema is the heart of it.
Correct. The cinema is an 8 screen, and that was very controversial. Social media got a hold of that early and took it, I believe, in a incorrect direction. There was a lot of myth about, the type of people that would associate with this, and movie theaters have been a concern with the town of Southbury for many years. There have been other proposals that have been turned down, but this one was a little bit different because we addressed the community, we addressed the scale, the concept of having the movie theater in the center, but all the screens in the back, the views of the river, the landscaping of the parking, again, a small linear park in the front to continue the idea of the Southbury Green.
Right.
And this is where, when you talk about, the vision or the concepts, when you have the same firm doing different types of projects, you get a similar look. And it just happened that as we moved on, the designs have progressed through time, but they keep the flavor of the community.
No, I think it just creates a lot of continuity, and whether it was intentional or not, it comes across as
Cohesive.
Cohesive, excellent word. And I, just as a compliment, there's so many people who have said to me, "What was there before?"
Yeah.
Because I can't believe there was ever anything else there. And again, it was just a wooded area
Most of them were
undeveloped?
fields. That actually was cornfields. That was vegetable fields. In the early days, that was all a mowed field, and they used to have the fireman's clam bake down by the river.
Okay.
These guys would just drive across the field, go down in the back. You'd sit by the river, and I remember that as a young boy.
Okay.
So we had a lot of different things.
And just anecdotally, it seems to me every time I drive by the movie theater, afternoon, evening, late at night, that parking lot is full.
It is.
So it seems to be something that's really appealed to the citizens of Southbury, surrounding towns, and I know people here in the village appreciate it.
The village appreciates it because it allows them to stay in the community. They don't have to travel long distances. We get people from Roxbury and Woodbury and Newtown and Oxford. They come here because they do other things in Southbury as well. But it's been a center for a lot of activity. When you come out of a movie and you see the people waiting, a lot of people conversing, a lot of people seeing people that they don't see on a regular basis, and that's the sense of community that you need places like this for people to meet.
So obviously in your career here in Southbury, you have seen resistance to change.
Correct.
And oftentimes, I mean, I'm not aware of any time that you have not succeeded, but hindsight is always easy that way. But clearly you've been involved in the last year or so in a controversy about some apartment units on Roxbury Road.
Yeah.
When you look at that, do you feel like the resistance is similar to what you've experienced in, like the cinema or even other projects going back to the travel center? Or do you think it's something different?
No, I think that the resistance is fear of the unknown. The travel center started off, people were afraid that people were going to come up on buses and do dastardly deeds in the bus stop, and it didn't turn out that way. It became an amenity for the community. The Southbury Car Wash, they didn't want a car wash. That was very controversial. The movie theater, they didn't want a movie theater. And I think the housing is a little misunderstood. I have 9 units of apartments in Garage Road and on 32 Poverty Road, which is behind 88 Main Street. And there are people in the community that live there. There are retired people, there's empty nesters, there's single people, there's business people. Business people's children live there. We've had virtually no problems with any of the people living there from any sort of troubles.
Well, I think you deserve a lot of credit for just standing up and saying, here's what I think the community needs, and I'll stand my ground here.
Yeah.
So I think anyone looking back has got to say, when we look at what we consider Southbury today, it's a lot of it, it's always the people, but a lot of it is the projects and the buildings that have been built over time.
They said it in the movie, if you build it, they will come.
Right.
And that concept is very true. When you provide a place for, a community to meet and greet and talk and socialize, you make a better community.
Right.
Because people get to know each other. And knowing each other is what I grew up with. And again, when we started this, I talked about, a lot of people came to the house when I was born that are still in the community and doing things. And, I was a young man that was accepted because I was a hometown boy. So they would take the ideas that we had about the Pomperog Office Park that they may have thought were space age at the time or large, but they allowed us to do our work.
Now, obviously, we've talked about your projects here in Southbury, but you have done throughout, Connecticut and beyond, I believe.
We do basically New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts.
Okay.
We've just completed a home down in Palm Beach, Florida. We did a home in Rye Beach, New Hampshire, and we've done some housing projects in Lexington, Kentucky. So.
But thinking about this kind of resistance to change that we've been talking about, do you see Southbury similar to other communities, different? Any observations about where we stand on moving forward?
We get this resistance in the housing sector. I did a project in Ridgefield, and it was very controversial. We did one in Wilton that's very controversial. We're working on another one in Wilton that the town is much more open to us now, because the project that we had completed has been accepted.
So looking back on the years, what would you say has been your most frustrating project to have worked on?
Oh my God. My partner always blames me of, having forgetfulness of, projects. It's like giving birth, you
Right.
forget the pain. But there have been a lot, and I believe it's just part of the process.
Okay.
I don't think one of them stands out. The most recent one was a long one, but I understood it.
Okay. Well, maybe that's the way it is. It's always the most recent one you
Yeah.
remember best. Well, on the flip side, which project, when you look around town, when you drive around, what's the project you're most proud of?
Oh my God. We did a little building for Newtown Savings Bank. It's a little gambrel building next to the Southbury Green in front of Star Shack's property. It's a nice little building. I did one for myself on Garage Road. We called it Three Gables, which I named after the building where the Raskelter is. That was my first commercial apartment
Right.
above combination, and I really I put a lot of energy and a lot of talent into it, and spent money, and it's generational for me.
All right. Well, looking to the future, I mean, you've been here for a long time.
Let's not
Seen
bring
a
that
lot of
up.
change. Well, it's
The gray hair shows.
we can't hide it. But looking to the future and the challenges to this town, I mean, it's a very different town today than it was when you first started working here.
Right.
And that's a very different town than when you were born and raised here. Looking to the future and challenges that will come to Southbury and changes that'll come here and to the region.
Yeah.
What sticks out to you? Or
Well, from going back to, from childhood through business until today, I feel that it's gone in the right direction. I'm very happy with what the community has to offer today, because when I was a young boy, there was very little to nothing to do. I think the fact that we did what we did for so many years took us through, the Great Recession. Southbury fared pretty well in comparison to other communities. The state of Connecticut has a lot of difficulties with the exodus and moving out. I think with some housing alternatives for people to be able to stay, I think with our retail development that we've done so far, that gives people a reason to come here. We have a tax base that can support a school system. Other towns are suffering from no industry and no commercial tax dollars to support the other things. We didn't touch on the wonderful park systems that Southbury has, the quality of life, the low crime, the good police department, the good fire department, the ambulance. All these things are built to grow. We have all the elements that you need to successfully move into the future. They may be modernized, they may expand, they may take on different roles, but I believe that this town of Southbury is in a very good place to go forward. I feel comfortable.
Okay. Well, let me challenge you on one area that I've been concerned about because of the nature of retail. The internet is something we never envisioned when we were young people, even when we were middle-aged people. And it's been pretty dramatic in the last 3 to 5 years in terms of internet sales and the competition, whether it's the Amazon or even a Walmart in terms of what they do with their online. So if you look at retail space, is that a concern to you as a landlord, if you will?
Yes. And as a landlord, I'm not that concerned, because we don't have an abundance of retail space. We basically have the corridor of Main Street from exit 14 to exit 15. The spaces that we've designed are very flexible to change. We had that argument with the Southbury Green when the commission wanted to know who was going to move in. And my comment to that was, it doesn't matter if you get the architecture right. The name on the sign doesn't matter. And that's proven to be correct, because many changes have taken place since 1996 when it opened, and a lot of the stores aren't even there anymore.
Right.
But they've come and go, and they've also upgraded. When they first opened that shopping center, it had a demographic that showed the dollars weren't in Southbury to support, the Class A tenants, the nationals. But after they got to see it, the sort of mom and pops that were in there went out, and nationals have come in. Staples came for IBM. IBM has diminished. Staples left because the community couldn't support a business supply store, and now you have Home Goods. So these things, and Joseph Bank went in to one end of it and took a piece, and now Home Goods takes the rest.
Right.
So I think over time, and we have a lot of service-orientated businesses. The medical at the movie theater, the retail wasn't as needed, so the medical facilities took over.
Right. In fact, I hope to show people a picture from, again, this is the 200th, but I kind of enjoyed looking at it, and I'll get a scan of that, but of the plaza and how the stores there, some are the same, but most of them have changed. In fact, as far as I know, multiple times.
Correct.
Not just once. So
Correct.
Change is just a part of life.
Part of the business.
And I think you make a very good point about if you have quality space, there'll always be a demand for it, and it'll be different, but the demand will be there. Well, Kevin, I really want to thank you. Appreciate you stopping by and sharing with us, I think, some wonderful observations and thoughts.
Thank you.
And congratulations to Hugh and you, see if I can say that well, and your whole firm for all the contributions they've made to the environment here in Southbury, and wish you the best of luck in the future. Thanks again for stopping by.
It was a pleasure.
Stay tuned for future editions of On the Town, and have a great day.